I want to welcome everybody to the next part of many series to come with the Pittsburgh Business Exchange, the organization commonly known as the premier and largest business networking organization in the region. This program has been put together in an effort to support all businesses, small, medium, and large, and get you the information and the resources that you need for your business, personally and professionally. My name is Ethan Nicholas, and I am the Interim Executive Director of Business and Economic Development at Slippery Rock University, and also the founder of the Pittsburgh Business Exchange originally, also known as PBX in the area. Special thanks to Kimberly Baker Nicholas, our virtual hostess today, who put the whole call and the program together for everyone here, and also allowing me to assist in moderating this call. As we get started, it may be best if you look to the top portion of your screen and switch it to speaker view so you're able to view any of the slideshows and also help to focus on the speakers at any given moment while they are presenting. It's at the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and it should be on speaker view, not gallery, unless you prefer gallery view. Everybody's line is muted, and just to let you know, and today our programming is about the new PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program funding that was just released 48 hours ago. So this is fresh information and some updates. Anyone who submitted questions previously during registration will hopefully get their questions answered, as many of them have been submitted in advance to today's speaker, Dr. Hunt. And we'll also have a 10 to 15 minute session for Q&A at the end, but I do want to moderate and help get some of these questions answered in advance. Before we get into the programming, and as the platform populates closer to 500 guests and participants, I'd like to say thanks to some of our sponsors today who support PBX in both great times and the more challenging times. And our presenting sponsor is actually Slippery Rock University, and we're lucky enough to have them as a sponsor of this call. Slippery Rock University is where you get a rock-solid education. I have Dr. Dave Jordan. I do have your line unmuted. Dr. Jordan is the Professor of Healthcare and Administration and Management in Slippery Rock University School of Business. Dr. Jordan.
Oh, thank you very much, Ethan. Just want to say that Slippery Rock University is really proud to sponsor the Pittsburgh Business Exchange. It's an honor to participate and be part of this important discussion about the Payment Protection Program that is so important to our business community. I want to thank PBX and Kimberly Baker Nicholas for hosting this event, including us in the event.
Yep, thank you very much. And today's program was also brought to you by H2R CPA. Thank you, Ed Shearer, one of the managing partners at H2R CPA and Accountants. Your line is unmuted. Ed, would you like to say a few words?
Oh, thank you, Ethan. And again, thanks to PBX and Kimberly Baker Nichols for putting this together. As Dr. Jordan previously stated, yes, this is a challenging time, and the PPP loan and the other impacts that the SBA has put forward for the region and the country are definitely needed, and there's a lot of questions surrounding it, so we're here to help with those questions. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And another gold sponsor on the line is John F. Seaback Insurance Agency. So I'm going to give a quick shout out to John F. Seaback Insurance Agency. They are actually our business insurers as an organization, as well as many other people in the Pittsburgh Business Exchange. I know that Kim sends them a lot of referrals, and they are absolutely fantastic to work with. Thank you so very much, John Seaback, Jesse, and Jason, for your sponsorship today. Also want to thank Dan Lynch, one of the managing partners at the Lynch Law Group. Dan, I've worked with Dan in the past. Dan has been named the fastest growing company in Pittsburgh with the Pittsburgh Business Times, as well as a plethora of other accolades. He has and works with dozens of attorneys who specialize in a myriad of expertise. Dan, your line is unmuted. Would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks, Ethan. Thanks for asking me to be a part of this. The Lynch Law Group is a full-service law firm. We have 3 offices, one in Cranberry Township, one in South Point, and one in Southport, Connecticut. We focus on various areas of the law, mainly small to middle market business owners and their companies. We do corporate transactional work, customer contracts, client contracts, mergers and acquisitions. We also do service agreements. We have an employment group. We have a real estate group. We do commercial litigation, and we have a transportation group. We have a very robust estate planning department that also helps our business owners with succession planning, and family law and intellectual property. So we've been doing webinars, and I call them Zoominars, every Saturday morning for various groups on this exact topic. So I'm anxious to learn more from Dr. Hunt, and looking forward to the program.
Thank you so much, Dan. Really appreciate it. You know what? I'm just going to give a quick shout out to Lance Diani and the team over at Community Bank. I know that they've been big supporters of the Pittsburgh Business Exchange, and I honestly, I personally, on a personal note, they're just really fantastic people, and they actually are very accessible. And I just want to thank Lance. In fact, if you're looking for a loan and have questions about loans for the PPE, I could even recommend Lance, who's actually on this call, to field some of those questions and even help you get an SBA loan, and the PPP and the emergency funds and all sorts of stuff. So highly endorse Community Bank if you're not already working with PNC Bank and some other banks in the area that are also very good banks. I see we have some very great people on the call. I see the treasurer of UPMC, Mr. Scott Lammy. Thank you for joining us today. I see the chief of police of the entire Pittsburgh Police Force, Scott Schubert. I see dozens of others on the call. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be a part of this update. Today's speaker is Dr. Kelly Hunt. And Dr. Hunt is the District Director of the United States Small Business Administration, the Pittsburgh District Office. And she's responsible for the delivery and leadership of the agency's financial and business development programs throughout 27 counties in Pennsylvania. Prior to her appointment at the SBA, she was employed at California University of Pennsylvania, where she spearheaded strategic initiatives to improve the overall entrepreneurial culture. And as I look through her bio, she has probably a couple dozen other accolades. She's actually a native of Washington County, PA, and serves on the leadership team for local organizations and has traveled internationally to help other communities. And she's got a family here in Western Pennsylvania, married to Terry for almost 30 years, and they have 3 grown children and are grandparents to 4 granddaughters. I'm not going to take another 2 minutes or 3 minutes to read all of your accolades, but we've got a real pro on the line. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Dr. Hunt, and she's going to go ahead and do some introductions, and I'm going to field some questions. Dr. Hunt, thank you for being here today, and thank you as I try to unmute you. There you go.
Yep.
All right, thanks for being
I'm
on.
unmuted. Thanks. And you read more than you really even needed to. I appreciate that. And so as Ethan had mentioned, I'm Dr. Kelly Hunt, District Director at Pittsburgh District Office of the U.S. Small Business Administration. And we wanted to come on the show today to talk to you about the Paycheck Protection Program, which we are in the first parts of our second phase of that funding for that. As most of you know, we ran out of funding just over a week ago, almost 2 weeks ago actually, for the first round of stimulus funding. And we were authorized on Friday when the president signed the new stimulus package, another set of money that went to that. So we're looking at now with the Paycheck Protection Program having about $310 billion in funding in that program. So I have some slides that we're going to go through real quickly, and then I'd like to open it up for questions. Is that good? Most of you know that we've had a very large response to the COVID-19 epidemic, the pandemic, in helping small businesses to respond to that. And we did that in our first phase through 2 loan programs, and we are still administering those loan programs now. And so we've been able to help quite a few businesses, but there's been some issues along the way. When we look back at that first phase, in 14 days, the SBA processed the same amount of loans in 14 days that they typically process in 14 years. So we were literally doing 1 year's worth of loans every day, which was, a lot more than our systems could handle. And so we are, really working hard to get the money out there. And we're doing that in 2 programs. One is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So our first loan that we came out with was the economic injury disaster loan. That was a loan that is administered by the SBA through our Office of Disaster Assistance. That portal had some changes to it early on and some different things going on with that, but that loan is up to $2 million. It has a portion of that loan which is called an EIDL advance, which is sort of like a grant up to $10,000 depending on the amount of employees you have. And these loans are applied for and approved right by the SBA in our Office of Disaster. So this one is kind of an internal loan that we use from time to time for different disasters. So this portal was open the first go around, and we took in so many applications that when the new funding was released on Friday, there was a decision made not to open this portal back up for new applicants just yet. So what they're doing is they're processing what's in that portal, and then we're anticipating it will open again, you know, maybe by the end of the week. And then our other loan, of course, is the Paycheck Protection Program. That's what we're going to be talking about a lot today. And that one, the Paycheck Protection Program, is different than our EIDL loan in that you apply on that loan for that loan through a lender. So you're going to go to an SBA lender. It could be one of the, you know, usually most of the banks in our area that businesses bank with are already SBA lenders. But if you would find that your bank is not an SBA lender, we have a lot of other options right now. We have online lenders like Cabbage, PayPal, Square, Intuit, and a lot more of those. They're offering the Paycheck Protection Program loan now, so you can literally, you know, go onto their website and apply for the PPP loan through there, which is a great help for a lot of our rural and minority businesses that weren't able to get to some of the larger and mid-sized banks that were processing these loans. So that helped that. So the Paycheck Protection Program, one of the biggest questions I get about this loan, and it turns out being one of the biggest issues, is the fact that people hear that this loan can be forgiven, and so people go and apply for it without fully understanding what the PPP loan is. And it is just like the title says, it is a loan that you're getting from the government to protect the paychecks of your employees for a period of 8 weeks. And the reason that the government is doing this is because the desire is to keep people off of unemployment, to keep them employed by their businesses so that they still have their benefits, they're still getting their paycheck at the same level as before the pandemic. And that's what most of the loan that you receive goes for. And a lot of people think it's a working capital loan, but it is not. So these loans can be up to $10 million, but most of these loans, in the first round, 75% of the loans were funded for less than $150,000. So you're looking at, you know, while there were some stories that have been in the news, and I you know, won't go into that, but of especially franchises that were able to get a hold of some of the money, most of which now have returned those funds. But these loans were always meant to go up to $10 million. But like I said, we know that 75% of the loans have gone to the smallest businesses in America, and those ones were funded at less than $150,000. So it's a good one. And then the forgiveness of the loans, like I had mentioned, these loans can be 100% forgiven. So it's almost like you're getting pass-through money from the government to pay your employees, and then if you do that, you owe them nothing back. So it is a great option if you go into it understanding what it is. And so to get that loan forgiveness, though, you have to make sure that you are abiding by the rules that are set forth in the interim final rule, and also in the facts that are both listed on the Department of Treasury's website. So for that, an 8-week period, and that 8-week period begins the day the loan funds are dispersed. So the day that you get the money released to you, you have to use for the next 8 weeks, 75% of those funds for payroll expenses, authorized payroll expenses, salary, benefits, things like that, that you are paying your employees. And these are going to be based on the calculations that you provided to your lender when you applied for the loan. So 75% of the funds are going to go for that. 25% of the funds, the 25 that's left, can be used for rent, mortgage interest, so not your mortgage payment, just mortgage interest, and utilities. And so those are the only authorized uses for this loan. You cannot make payments on your equipment. You can't make payments on previous loans that you had, or any type of anything else. If you have a mortgage on a property that your business owns, you cannot make the mortgage payment with this. So those are the only authorized uses. Payroll for 75%, 25% for rent, mortgage interest, and utilities. So, and if you abide by that for the entire 8-week period, and that payroll means that you're keeping the number of employees the same and you're keeping their pay levels the same. You can't cut people's out. Well, you can cut their hours because some of them may not even be working during this time. And that's always a thing. People say, well, my company's closed down. We understand that, but that's why the government is giving you the money to pay your employees. They don't necessarily have to work during this 8-week period, but they have to be on payroll. They have to be paid at the same rate that they were paid before your business closed, and they have to be paid throughout that entire 8-week period. So, and if you do that, like I said, the loan will be forgiven. You'll owe nothing. If you don't do that and you owe either all of the loan or a portion of the loan, which will be determined after that 8-week period, then your loan payments are deferred for 6 months. This is only a 2-year loan. So if you get a very large loan and you don't use it for the way that you can to get it forgiven, you're going to have to pay this loan back in just 2 years. It does have only a 1% interest rate. So it's, you know, the interest rate's definitely not high on that. So who can apply for these? Small businesses with less than 500 employees, 501c3 nonprofits, private nonprofits, veterans organizations, faith-based organizations, which was a big difference from some of the small business lending we've done before. But these are the people that can apply for these. Also, agricultural businesses. And there's been a big push in the second round of funding to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the agricultural businesses and getting the PPP money out to them as well. One of the great things about this loan is there's no collateral, no personal guarantee, and no fees to pay. And like I said, you can get these through your local lenders, an SBA lender, also through some other smaller lenders, you can get them, and then online as well. And these loans turn around very quickly. So you're going to submit your application to your lender's going to review it. And these loans are actually approved by the lender, not by the SBA. So your lender will approve the loan. They'll submit it to the SBA for a review, for verification. A loan number is assigned, and then your lender has 10 days to disperse the funds, 10 calendar days from that time to disperse the funds to the borrower. So it's a very quick loan application process. A lot of the questions I get on this are, you know, if I've already applied for the PPP in the first round, what do I do? Well, the first thing that you need to do, if that's your case, you need to contact your lender immediately and find out why your loan was not submitted in the first round, and make sure that they are planning to submit your loan or have already submitted your loan in the second round. You know, these loans, it's written right in the interim final rule that these loans are on a first come, first served basis. Lenders should not be holding or delaying any applications. So you need to make sure that your lender is going to submit that application so that you can get in there before that funding is depleted. So, and the only way that you can do that is by contacting your lender. So first go around, we went through the money quite quickly. Like I had mentioned, the average loan size was fairly small on that, but we ended up going through about $342 billion. So quite a bit of that money went very quickly. And over almost 70,000 loans were made just in Pennsylvania. So when you look at the national loan numbers compared to what was done in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania received more than their fair share of that money. So that's kudos to our Pennsylvania lenders that were out there working so hard to get that money to the small businesses. We received over almost $15.7 billion in Pennsylvania. So more than almost 6% of the total amount just went to the state of Pennsylvania. So we really did well with that. And like I said, almost 70,000 small businesses were helped with that. Like I said, we're in phase 2 now. As of yesterday, we had only spent about $70 billion of that money that was in there. So we still have quite a bit of money left in that, over $240 billion. We've already done almost 700,000 loans, and working with 5,100 lenders. We definitely increased, like I'd mentioned with the online lenders, definitely increased the amount of lenders that we had, and trying to make sure that we were really getting the money out to the people that needed it the most, including our minority and rural businesses. So we have a lot of smaller loans that are going out through some of those. And so we've helped a lot of businesses in the Pittsburgh area. We've had a lot of calls from people that have received the money, and, it's been, really good for that. But, like I had mentioned, there's been a lot of problems along the line, a lot of things that we're still working through. And, so that's why I really, like I said, wanted to give an opportunity to everyone to ask some questions and to, let me try to help them as they navigate the process. I wanted to share some information. I know not everybody on the call is going to be at that same level. I didn't talk so much about the EIDL loan, but I do want to just say about EIDL, the number one question that we get right now is, I applied for an EIDL and I haven't heard a thing. And that is actually not a bad thing. That's nothing to panic over. If you applied for the EIDL loan on the portal on the SBA website, and you got to the part of the application where a screen popped up that said your application has been successfully submitted, and it gives you a loan number there that begins with the number 3, then you are in the queue for an EIDL loan and an EIDL advance. So no, you will not hear from the SBA. There is no communication back and forth. The EIDL advances are being processed before the loans. Those will literally show up in your bank account, the bank account that you provided. So be checking your bank account, making sure you'll see money go in there, however many employees you've had, up to $10,000, $1,000 per employee. You can look at that and you'll see, $5,000 gets deposited. You'll see the SBA there in the memo, and you'll know that that's your EIDL loan. After that, a loan officer will contact you through email to work on processing your loan if you decide that you would like to take out a loan. So that kind of is a breakdown of the EIDL process.
So, Dr. Hunt, I have a quick question. I received over 125 questions. A lot were bundled in with similar themes. And on this call, as I look, we have some people who only have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 employees, and then we have some people who have literally tens of thousands of employees, and we're all listening. My question is, can you, just to do a real scenario, and we're going to use our imagination. So let's pretend a company has 4 employees. They were furloughed 5 weeks ago, let's just say that. And all of a sudden you get a deposit of this loan from the SBA that you qualified for forgiveness. And the loan is actually deposited into the account. Tell me tell me about the timestamp. Tell me about from when you need to start spending it. Can you spend it from the past 2 weeks with the payroll right then and there? How do you keep track of this to prove to the auditors, if there are ever any, in this case, you did it. Can you use that for employee
Sure.
case with, and another question, which is within that as well, sorry to group it all together, will
No,
you
it's
be
okay.
will you be penalized when you run out of money and you can't reopen or can't afford to pay them and they have to apply for unemployee benefits all over again? So
Sure.
sorry, that's all in one bundle as a real
Okay,
case.
no.
Walk me
Not
through
a
this.
problem.
Business.
Not a problem. And I am assuming that you're referring to that they received a PPP loan, not an EIDL loan, because
They received a PPP
Right.
payment. Let's say it was $50,000. We'll just throw
Right.
that number out there. And
Sure.
they're supposed to use 75% of
Sure.
it for,
Okay.
yeah.
Because had it been an EIDL loan, there's really no stipulation on that. You can use that money any way you wish. But now go into the PPP. So I'm a small business owner. I have 4 employees. They've already been furloughed, so they're probably already somewhere in the unemployment process. Maybe they've received money, maybe they haven't. And I get the money today. Your 8-week period that we're going to look at for loan forgiveness begins today. So there's no grace period, there's no waiver, there's no extension. It begins the day that the money is released to you, dispersed to you. So then you are facing an issue now because your employees are who knows where, and you've got to have them back on payroll that day. So, you're going to contact them, you're going to let them know that you are bringing them back to work. Whether they're coming back to work or not is irrelevant, but you are putting them back onto payroll. So they are going to be back on payroll as of that day. And you're going to start paying them their salary, their benefits, whatever you used in your calculations, you're going to start paying them starting that day. Now, if your business is closed
or willing or anywhere or whatever, this is happening, whether they're coming to work sick, not sick,
right.
on leave.
So say for instance, your business is non-essential and per the governor's orders, your business is closed. That doesn't matter. You are still paying them while you're on the Paycheck Protection Program. You're going to pay them their salary and their benefits and whatever you said you were going to give them, whatever your payroll is, you're going to give them for that 8-week period. Now, an issue that we're seeing is that people are, especially if you have lower salaried employees. So if your employees are making $70,000 a year, and you're bringing them back, they want to come back onto payroll because $70,000 plus their benefits, plus, their health care, that's a great deal. What happens is a lot of businesses that went and got this loan have employees that are getting minimum wage. And so if you're getting minimum wage and you look at what minimum wage is compared to what is authorized on unemployment right now with the extra $600 a week of federal unemployment, employees are saying, I don't want to come back on your payroll. I want to collect unemployment. I'm making 3-4 times as much money. Well, the thing with unemployment is you have to be unemployed to get unemployment, right? You can't just decide, I don't want to go to work and I'm going to collect unemployment. So, technically, and I was on a call the other day with somebody from the Department of Labor that was speaking about this, and I asked the question straight out. Like, if you have an employee that says, no, I don't want to come back, I want to collect unemployment, and she said they don't have that choice because you're telling them, I am bringing you back. Whether they come to work or not is irrelevant, but you are bringing them back at the same salary they were before the pandemic hit. You're going to pay them during that period. They have to abide by that. They have to come back on, or they would lose their unemployment benefit because they turned down employment. So that's how that works. You're going to, you're, like I mentioned, you're going to provide calculations when you apply for the PPP. You're going to do your payroll calculations. And so you're going to use that as a guide. as to, you know, what you said you were going to pay them. You're going to pay them their money for the 8-week period. Now, at the end of that 8-week period, you've spent down that 75% of the money on 2 months of salary, payroll, whatever those other, your benefits packages were. You've done that. You've spent the other 25% on your mortgage interest, your utilities, and, you know, you've used up that money. Maybe you even go over a little bit on the 75% and use a little more on payroll. That's perfectly acceptable. And you're going to go back to your lender and you're going to say, I'm ready to request forgiveness, apply for forgiveness. You're going to provide your lender with your payroll records, or if you have an online payroll service like ADP or something, Paychecks or something, you're going to be able to print something off that shows that you made, your payroll for that 8-week period. You're going to be able to turn that in. Anything that you use to spend that other 25% of the money, you're going to turn that in, and your bank is going to review that. They're going to review that. They'll verify that. And then they let the SBA know that that was verified. The SBA is not going to see that information. They're going to take the bank's verification. Now, we did receive some new rules on loans that are made over $2 million. If the loan is over $2 million, the SBA is going to actually look at that more closely. But on the other loans, the bank will be verifying those. And so that's how that process works.
Just to be more clear,
Sure.
Let's say you had 50 employees, but you only brought back 40. You need to bring back every single person.
Yes. If you used,
go ahead.
If you used all 50 in your payroll calculation, so you took out a loan to re-employ 50 people. Do you get what I'm saying? So we're basing this on what you told the bank you were going to do. So yeah, that's what you have to do. If you told the bank you had 40 employees and this is what, but if you're, we're going by what you said. Now, here's the thing though. If say you have a few that are not going, say you have an essential business and your people can come to work, you can say that, some people might not be able to come back to work. Maybe they have young children at home and they're not going to be able to take care of their children and things like that. So you're going to have some that are just going to say, no, I'm not coming back. My health is not good. I don't want to return to work. And so you're going to have that. You can hire new people. You can do things like that to get that number back up to where it needs to be, because that head count and the payroll both need to stay the same. Of whatever that you said in your application you were going to do.
So I know that we answered a lot of questions. One of the recurrent questions is like internet being considered a utility. Like, are there any exceptions to utilities that you have a list on your website or something?
We do not. As of right now, what the interim rule says is utilities. So I would take that to mean things like your phone, your electric, water, gas, whatever utilities you have. We do expect that there will be some further guidance on the process for applying for the loan forgiveness. We've been promised that for a few weeks, and we expect that out anytime now. But at this point, we just know the word utilities. And I think that if you stay within that and don't, don't try to be too crazy, I think that you'll be fine,
So I'm not sure if you answered this or not. There's a lot of information there. What happens if you have a bit, and by the way, this was submitted by Curtis with Cosman Development, who has millions and millions of square feet of office space and commercial real estate. What happens if you have businesses such as theaters, gyms, entertainment venues, and restaurants that can't open by the 30th? And let's say that you get this loan, and now you're going to pay your employees, but you can't even open. Like, yes, that's correct.
it doesn't, I know what the argument is. It doesn't do them any benefit to pay people to not come to work. It would be much easier to be able to say, oh, we're going to hold this money and we'll start paying them once our business reopens. But that was never the purpose of the PPP. The purpose of this was to keep them on payroll right now, to make sure that they're staying on payroll for that 8-week period. We're assuming that once we come out of that 8-week period, that most businesses are back up and running and are going to be able to, keep their employees. And so, but it was meant to keep them off of unemployment on your payroll, so that whether you have a business that can kind of adapt in some way to an online presence, or a restaurant that can do pickup instead of, in dining room seating and things, that you were keeping those employees so that when you were ready to reopen fully, that your employees were there with you and ready to work. So
Okay.
there is at this point, no exception for businesses that are closed or not. It just doesn't matter.
You can change their job description on a dime and basically say, you're no longer the custodian, you are now helping me sort through spreadsheets or something like that. You can have them.
As long as your employees are not union, you can do something like that. And
Okay.
as long as you keep them at the same salary. You know what I mean? So if you take somebody who was your CFO and you make him the janitor, you've got to pay him his CFO salary, which is what you would have figured in. And you got to remember, and I think this is the part that we get hung up on. This, if your loan is forgiven because you follow these rules, this isn't your money. This is the government's money that they are giving you to keep your people paid. So, like I said, whether I personally think that, it could be a little bit different or not, this is the rules as it is. And that 8-week period starts whether you're open or closed.
So the next question is revolving around healthcare. A lot of questions about this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe you talked about that, but I'll give you an example. My friend Dave Dietrich, CEO with a care company, said that he decided to keep the health insurance in effect for his employees for all of April. And, tens of thousands of dollars, I'm not going to say the amount here, was paid on the first of the month. If you didn't receive the PPP funding until, let's say, 2 weeks from that time, is that cost eligible for the PPP loan that can be forgiven, and will it be treated as compensation?
Okay, first I'd like to say hi to Dave too, because I do know him as well. But the 8-week period, like I mentioned, starts the day the loan funds are dispersed. And I've had questions that are very similar to this about any kind of a retirement or any type of a bonus that was a big lump sum like this, where it was paid earlier in the month. But the thing with the money is everything is prorated. When you come up with your annual average salary, you're looking at, everything taken out, like whatever they would pay yearly, and you're drilling down to what that is per month. And that's the calculation that the borrower provides to the lender, a monthly average salary. So there may be times, depending on, some of the circumstances of when the money was spent, but there could be times when you're going to be able to take something that is a big payment and drill down to what would 2 months of that payment be if you paid that, annually. Because that's what you would have included in your calculation, right? Because if you know that you pay that benefit payment every year, and benefits are part of a salary package, it's not just salary, it's payroll. So you would have drilled down and you could figure out what that was per month, and you could include that in your PPP and be able to pay, what the 2-month part of that was for the 8 weeks. But you couldn't pay the entire year of someone's salary or make a big deposit into their 401k that would cover the whole year, something like that. You can't do that. It would just be that 8-week period.
2 questions. 1099 contractors, and then the other question. Well, let's start with that.
Yeah, let's start with that because that in itself is a big one. And that is, there's a couple, that 8-week period is a huge issue. The other issue is 1099 contractors. If you read in the interim final rule, it refers to 1099 contractors in 2 different locations. One, as a way to show the eligibility of a small business, saying that you are truly a small business because you have employees or you have 1099 contractors, which means you are really a small business because you have this. That determines eligibility. And yes, you can use the fact that you have 1099 independent contractors as eligibility to apply for the PPP. However, you cannot use 1099 contractors when you are talking about payroll and your payroll calculations. You cannot pay a 1099 contractor with the PPP funds. The reason is because a 1099 independent contractor is not your employee. Right? They are not your employee. You have opted, as a small business owner, you can either have employees or you can 1099 everyone and you don't have to have any of the issues with payroll and, personnel and all those things, right? So if you're a business that opted for that independent contractor, then you've lost the benefit of having the employee. You cannot, you can't use them for the payroll protection program for calculating your payroll or to pay them at all. Now, a 1099 contractor is an independent contractor, usually going to be an LLC, a sole proprietor, something like that. That person can file for their own PPP. You can be literally a sole proprietor, just doing a Schedule C, and you can file for as a business and file for the PPP for yourself.
So let me get this straight, just so we're on the same page. If somebody has 10 contractors that they have paid a large sum of money over the past year, and all 8 of those people are eligible to apply for the PPP themselves.
Right, they are.
Okay, so it's up to them.
I see a question that popped up from Donna Chappell about what if you take your 1099 employees and you hire them for the 8-week period? You can't do that either, because in the PPP, it states that everybody that you're counting as your employee for your payroll calculations had to have been on your payroll prior to the pandemic starting. And I think they used the date for that as February 15th, if I'm not mistaken, is the date that they use. So these are going to be people that you had to have as employees prior to the pandemic.
So a lot of these questions could be answered when clearly there's some businesses on here that are afraid and fearful and don't have the answers to questions. And a lot of the questions, I talked to Lance Diani from Community Bank, and he helped fill 100 loans like yesterday or this week. And it was insane. And all of the questions, that's not all of them, but a lot of them are answered during the application process. So talking to a trusted banker that, that's going to hold your hand through the process and help you through the paperwork will also answer your questions. Would you say that just applying, if you think you need it, you probably need it, you should just apply for it?
Yes, I struggle between that because, as I had mentioned earlier, I feel like there's a lot of businesses that applied for this, but what they really needed was working capital. So say you have maybe you're a sole proprietor yourself, you're the only employee, or maybe you have 1 or 2 employees and you're still able to work some. Maybe you're a restaurant and you're still doing takeout, and so you're making enough that you could cover salaries, but you're not making enough money that you can cover your bills. Then this is not the loan for you. The EIDL loan would be much better because that provides money that is going to come to you that you can use in any way you see fit. The EIDL gives you up to a 30-year repayment at 3.75 interest, 3.75 interest, or 2.75 if you're a nonprofit. And that gives you working capital. And you know, the PPP is not going to provide you working capital. It's going to pay your employees, but it's not going to give you that working capital you need. And I know a lot of the questions, and I had seen on the list you had emailed me earlier, one of the question was, well, how does PPP and EIDL, how do those two work together? And they can work together. You can apply for both the EIDL loan and the PPP and use them both. Keep your employees paid and have the working capital you need to run your business. The only issue with that is on the EIDL advance. Remember, I had mentioned there's a part of the EIDL that you can take. You don't have to take it. It's called the advance. It's a grant. It gives you $1,000 per employee as a grant, and you can use it up to 10 employees. If you have more than 10 employees, you just get $10,000. There's no higher than $10,000. That's the cap, but it would give you that money. And if you use that, you cannot have that EIDL advance because that's for employees and the PPP loan forgiveness. So there's a conflict between them, but your PPP could pay it off. Your EIDL advance can be paid off, or just don't take the EIDL advance, just take the EIDL loan. That'll give you the loan at 3.75% interest over up to 30 years. It'll give you the working capital, but you can still have the PPP to pay your salaries.
Real
So
quick,
those
the
two can
difference
absolutely be used together.
the EIDL loan, and then there's the emergency loan. One's for $10,000 and the other one is for a limit of what? How much?
The EIDL loan goes up to $2 million. The EIDL advance is a part of that is like a grant. So that is the part that you don't have to pay back, and that's $10,000 per employee.
That makes a lot of sense. That answers a lot of people's questions here. And then can you give a quick update of deadlines when, and this is a loaded question kind of because I know you can't predict the future, but when is one of those EIDL loans going to open again? When is the cutoff? What are your predictions on timelines of things that are going to be available?
Sure.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, there are a lot of applications for EIDL that are still in the pipeline. That's why I said if people applied for an EIDL and they received that screen that said their application was successfully submitted, do not panic. I talk to people every day. I know people that just this week received their EIDL advance and that are receiving the correspondence to apply to get their EIDL loan dispersed. So don't panic on that. Your application is in the system. Once the SBA goes through enough of those that they feel comfortable that there is still enough money in EIDL to open up for more applications, which we do believe will happen, that will reopen. Now, we've heard rumors, it could be this week, but I don't have anything official that I can say on that. I just don't know, but we do anticipate it will reopen at some point. So, if it's something somebody wants to do, make sure you're following up on that. Make sure you've got some kind of an alert set up so that when that portal opens, you want to be there really quick. The EIDL application is extremely easy. All you're going to need is just your EIN and then a little bit of information about your cost of goods sold and, and your employees, very, very little bit of, nothing gets uploaded. You don't need any tax returns. There's no documents to upload at all. So it's a very easy process to do. And so, but like I said, we just don't know exactly when it'll be reopened. And I saw a question I wanted to address because I've seen it a couple times pop up here. And that's if you do not meet the requirements of loan forgiveness. So remember the 75% for payroll, 25% for the rent or mortgage interest or utilities. Say you don't meet that exactly. One or two of your employees don't want to come back, and you're at about 72% over here and 28% over here. What happens? I wish I could tell you exactly what's going to happen, but I had mentioned earlier that we are still awaiting some guidance on that. The way that the interim final rule reads is that you will be required, if you don't meet those requirements at 75-25, you don't do it just right, it says that you will be required to pay back some or all of the loan. Now, it would be easy to just accept that as all of the loan would be if you just took that PPP loan and used it as working capital, didn't pay any payroll. But we're waiting to get more guidance on that to see if how they're going to make that ratio work to determine what portion of that loan will be repaid. So we're hoping to get that this week, hopefully.
Do you see some of the chat questions there? By the way, I'm just at this time, you know, there have been hundreds of questions at this point coming in that were submitted earlier. There was one a little earlier here. If you look at the chat section, actually it was sent to me privately by Peter. IRS code section 265 says we cannot deduct expenses attributable to non-taxable revenue. Will this apply to PPP funds, which are non-taxable revenue? Meaning the payroll costs and the expenses used, will these funds not be deductible?
I'm not sure. He would have to talk to the IRS, but I don't believe, if he means are these funds taxable that you're given, I don't believe they are. I believe that the loan is forgiven, and so it's actually a loan that is forgiven. But if it's something with the IRS code, yeah, I would contact the IRS.
Just a 2-minute warning here for everybody. I don't know how you are on time for Dr. Hunt. We still have
I'm fine.
Fine. We have 271 callers. I'd like to keep the call going if people have more questions.
Yeah.
So if people, the whole purpose of this call obviously is to answer questions, alleviate some of the fear, get people going.
Sure.
Just an announcement for those who want to leave now, they can, but we do have resources. Some people signed up for inquiries regarding legal questions, accounting questions, insurance questions, and banking questions. And having been somebody who has applied for the loan myself, I have a lot of the answers, and I can direct people to some of our sponsors who we really trust. And we'd be happy to do a legal webinar on a Saturday morning with multiple people, as well as accounting, insurance, or banking. And we can do it as early as sometime this afternoon, or Kim, I'm sure, can set this up somehow with our partners. But I just wanted to throw that out there. All you got to do is email kim@pghbx.com with your inquiries, and we'll point you in the right direction. So back to you, Dr. Hunt. Let's start answering some of these other questions.
Sure. I saw a question about the business entity, like where is it headquartered at, and foreign-owned businesses. And there is a stipulation in there that does allow foreign-owned businesses as long as the majority of the employees are in America, or and are American, then they can apply. But I would definitely take a look at the interim final rule to make sure that they read through that to make sure that they meet all of that stipulations for that. But there are cases where that can where they can be. Another change that came about this go around was something that the SBA has in all of our loans, and that's in a lesser way, but in all of our loans we have, it's called credit elsewhere. So if you want to apply for an SBA loan and you need an SBA guarantee, you have to you'll show to the bank that you cannot obtain credit anywhere else, and that's why you need an SBA loan. We didn't have that with the PPP, and so that opened the door for some of the businesses that were that fit our size description, but really didn't fit what we were saying is a small business that needed the help of taxpayer funding. So that was changed this go around. And so these businesses need to show now that they don't have access to selling a bunch of their stock, or, creating new stock to sell, or to, or a line of credit or something somewhere where they can get the money that they need. So that is now part of this process, that they do have to show that. So I think that, that eliminates a lot of the stuff that we've seen with some of the publicly traded companies.
Another question about 401k contributions. It's really frustrating for a lot of accountants, and I was surprised to see how many people were actually on the call that are actually accountants in the PBX organization, and they even have questions. One was just submitted via email. Discretionary 401k contributions. How are those being treated with the PPP? And
Well, again, it's going to go back to what that borrower told the bank they were going to use that 75% of the money for. They would have come up with this number. You know, if you look at the interim final rule, it says that you take your yearly expenses, payroll expenses, the yearly payroll expenses. If you're not a seasonal business, just a regular business, you divide that by 12 and you get an average monthly payroll. And that's the amount that they use. Then you multiply that by 2.5, and that's the amount of loan that people that with a PPP would have applied for. So my question is, what did you include in that? If you included anything, if you included the benefit of a 401k contribution, you would have included that entire amount, right? So whatever that was for the year, and when you divide that by 12, multiply by 2.5, you would have enough in your calculation to cover 2 months of that 401k contribution, because you can use it for for the benefits package, like for that. So it would be dependent again on what that person applied for, what they said in their calculations, what they included. No, you cannot take your PPP funds and pay 1 year of 401k deposits for your employees. That's not what it's for. But the part that goes along with that 8-week period, you could use it.
I'm going to make an announcement to everybody in the group. If you have questions that have been unanswered up until this point, I'm going to ask you to resubmit your questions at the bottom. And for those of you that came in late, you might want to just watch the video that's being recorded that we'll upload if they're commonly asked questions. If you have very specific questions or questions you don't think were answered, again, please type them in now. And I believe, Dr. Hunt, you can see those and answer those as they come in.
Yeah, and I saw a couple questions again about, if your employee number drops, can you hire new employees during that 8-week period? Absolutely. And if your business, say during that 8-week period, the governor lifts maybe of a construction company and you're able to go back to work during that 8-week period, you can lift that as well. And you can still use those PPP funds to keep people paid, but you could hire more people. You can do whatever you want during that period. A lot of this goes back to, as a business owner, you've got to make decisions for your business, and so as your business is able to reopen, you want to do that. So you definitely, we're not trying to stifle that in any way. There's a question about, will the organizations receiving PPP loans be published? With federal taxpayer funds, everything is an open book. I don't know. I know that there are some websites out there that are not the SBA that are publishing some information, but we also, I tell people that call me up that are usually upset about something, and I tell them, you always have the opportunity to apply for a Freedom of Information Act. If there's any question you want to know, submit a Freedom of Information Act and the SBA will give you the information. So I would assume that a lot of that will be out there. And a lot of it, just looking at the Pittsburgh Business Times and the local newspapers, you're starting to see a lot of that stuff coming out. People that are saying they've got loans and what they're doing with the loans. I have a question here, probably from a banker, talking about E-Tran. E-Tran is the system that the banks upload their loan applications in. So as I mentioned with the PPP program, the local lender approves those loans, but they have to be submitted to the SBA. And the way they do that is through E-Tran. And E-Tran, as I mentioned mentioned, we're doing in the first day that PPP phase 2 was open, we did 2 years worth of loans in one day. I had said before we were doing 1 year in a day during the first one, but in the second, on Monday, we did 2 years worth of loans in that one day. And so that system is very slow. And a lot of that is that when we went through this the first time, we found that a lot of the larger banks were uploading an enormous amount of applications. They were using some new ways of technology to do that, which is, you know, normally great, but it's not great if you're a small bank and you don't have those types of technologies to do that. And so they've put a lot of checks and balances into that E-Tran system to make sure that we are limiting the number of applications that come in. We're not allowing the robotic arms to do that anymore. You know, they have to be manually input. So there is a great slowing down of that system, so that we are ensuring that smaller banks are able to get their loans in as well.
Okay, another real quick question. This is interesting. This is from Gail Serba and Butler. If the company is working contract, like electric utilities, and the job comes to an end on the contract,
Mm-hmm.
Do you keep paying them on their payroll, or is this one of those questions that goes right back to, it has to be, if it was on the application, then you got to pay them even if the contract is over? Is that what you're saying?
Right, but if coming to work every day is not a constraint for the PPP program, because most of the businesses that are applying for these loans are either completely shuttered at this point, they're not in operation at all because of the mandates on our state, or they are operating in a very limited capacity, like the restaurants and things like that, where, you know, or now the gardening stores where they're open, but you got to drive up and they load your car. So we understand that a lot of your employees are not coming to work at all, but they are still getting paid. But they are not on unemployment. They're still on your payrolls. They're still getting paid. And that's what this money is for. This money is given to you so that you can keep paying them throughout that 8-week period.
Great answer, and a great question right here coming from a good friend, Caleb Zelenko. And everything comes down to whether or not the expenses have to be both incurred and paid within the 8 weeks, or whether it accommodates both costs incurred and payments made during the 8-week period. We're hearing kind of variable data on this.
And that is an area where I had mentioned when we talk about loan forgiveness that is not clearly spelled out in the interim final rule, nor the facts that the Treasury Department has put out. So we don't really know which way it will go yet. I would assume that, you know, some businesses are on one type of accounting system, some businesses are on the other. You know, they're going to have to do what they are, you know, the way that they are doing their accounting anyway, and we'll get further guidance on that.
Let me ask this question on a personal and professional level. Would you advise somebody to start talking to an attorney now, because there are so many variables? So when and if there are issues with loan forgiveness or anything like that, that they have somebody to kind of represent them? Or how would you, because there's so much going on.
I wouldn't say go and talk to an attorney yet. I would say that, you know, there are people that have already received their PPP loans. And so there are people that are 2 weeks into that loan, right? So they have 8 weeks, they're already 2 weeks in, and we still don't have all of the guidance. You have to remember, you know, that, you know, the PPP program, Paycheck Protection Program, has never existed before now, right? So we found out, the SBA found out that they were getting the money, and this program was created through the CARES Act, you know, through the information Congress gave us, but it had to be created. It didn't exist. There was no infrastructure for this. So we've been, putting together the actual program, the interim final rules, the facts that are now governing this program as we go along. So, all I can say is do the very best you can with the information you have now. If you're asking me, do I think there would be a legal case for somebody that is 3-4 weeks in before the interim final rule is released? Of course, I think that. You can't abide by rules that you don't know exist. But all I can say is do the best you can with the information you have now. If you are doing that 75%, keep it clean, either put the money in its own account or something, keep it clean, keep great records on your 25%. I really don't think that you'll have an issue. And I'd wait to talk to an attorney till after the rules come out and you apply, and work with your lender. They'll know as soon as those rules are released as well. And the whole thing with the SBA was to get this money out to the people who need it as quickly as we can. That was the purpose. So there's no catch-22 where we're waiting to kind of, pull the noose at the end because you're 76-24 or something like that. Our goal was to get the money out there, and that's what we're doing to the best of our ability. The PPP program was actually created in 5 days. The portal, everything that we're doing, and that's why there's still some issues there. Like I said, our loan systems, our E-Tran, our CAV system, the houses E-Tran, these were not meant to take in the amount of loans that we're putting through there. And so, we're doing it day by day, and we're really hoping that we get new guidance is being released every day. We received, I think, 2 or 3 different things today, none that are really that, most for lenders that we've already sent out, but it is something that we're getting out as soon as we can.
All right, I've got a question here for you about banks. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or anything like that, but how
believe me, I read the news.
Okay, how is the SBA or whatever, the government in general, ensuring that Pennsylvania and other PP funds aren't going to people who are getting preferential treatment by banks? There's been some talk about potential lawsuits against certain banks that are giving preferential loans to really, the bigger the loan, the bigger the payout to the bank. Who's kind of looking into this to make sure that the little guys aren't getting cut out of the equation that probably in a lot of cases really need it the most?
Right. And I'll be honest with you. I'm a small business owner. My husband owns a construction company where he's the only employee. I totally get this. And it makes me very upset to think that, that is happening. I've had a lot of calls to my office, people reporting our local banks in Pittsburgh who they felt had done this. People that had turned in a PPP application the beginning of April, and it just didn't make it into the portal. You had it for 3 weeks, but it just didn't make it in. And so, I think there are going to be questions, but the SBA has recognized that this was an issue. And when I talked to you a few minutes ago about E-Tran and how slow the system is going and different things like that, that is why these things are happening, because we have now said that the large banks, the really mega banks, national lenders, they cannot just have computer systems that are inputting these loan applications at rates that are just beyond anything we can imagine. We've stopped that. So that kind of puts everybody back on an equal playing field. And we know that this time around, we have a lot of small banks that are doing great things. One of our local lenders on Monday that was our top, had more applications submitted into the PPP portal on Monday, on the first day, was a small lender. And I mean a really small lender. So we're talking about things that the SBA is doing that are allowing those smaller lenders to have that equal playing field. So that has been a big thing. The SBA did take batched applications from people that had more than 5,000. Those batch applications, as far as I know, they haven't even started the process yet. And so, there's that piece of it. But we are really looking at, and this time, another thing that the SBA did, along with the Treasury, was they set aside $60 billion for small and rural minority-owned businesses. And how they did that is they took that $60 billion. They allotted $30 billion of that to mid-size lenders and $30 billion to very small lenders. And those are the lenders that are out in our areas that are going to be our urban areas. Lenders that maybe they're not banks, maybe they're not a traditional bank. It's a credit union or a CDFI or some CDC. Somebody who is lending out this money that has a particular niche area of demographics. And we've allotted $30 billion in that pot for those to be able to make sure that they're getting their fair share of that money. Now, when that money has been used up entirely, then they'll be able to draw out of the big money, the big pot of money that is, out there. So it was $250 billion, and then $30 billion for middle and $30 billion for small. And so that is really, these are things that have been put in place this second go around to make sure that is happening. And I've always told borrowers, anybody that has contacted me, you need to get on the phone with your lender and make sure that they're putting your application through. If you don't feel that you're being served by them, then you need to go find a different bank that is going to really take into consideration the needs of a small business. And we have online lenders like PayPal and Square and Intuit. You can contact them. They're putting these applications in as well. And so, do that. But this is first come, first serve. Banks should not be holding any applications at all.
One of the questions about that is, do you have to bank with a bank? Do you have to be a customer of the bank to apply for another bank for a loan, or can you just apply with any bank?
That is a question that is up to the local banks, and we saw that on day one. It wasn't something we really anticipated, but on day one, everybody came out and said, "Nope, if you're not our customer, we're not taking your application." And that was because there were so many they felt that they needed to serve their own clients first. And I can't really fault them for that. You want to have some preference if you're banking there. There are some banks, though, that are taking some local banks that are taking applications from people that don't have accounts. And there are some banks that are saying, look, if you open an account with us, we'll put your PPP application in the same day. And then, like I said, to help that even further this time, we have those online lenders who you don't have to do anything. You just literally apply online. So there are a lot more options this time around than there were the first phase.
And we're getting a lot of questions, and thank you for answering all these questions even after the time. We still obviously have 200 people on the line here, so we're just going to keep rolling with it until you give me the red flag there. What about, is there a place, and I think you already answered this, but could you answer this more clearly? Where can people check to see the status of their application? If they applied, now they're in the dark, they're logging into their bank to see if money's been deposited, or checking the mail every day, or going to the office to check their box. Is there a portal or something where people can see where the heck this process is?
Sure. Well, if you are referring to the EIDL loan, and that we get a lot of questions about the EIDL, and you've submitted an application and you have no idea where your application is, there is a customer service that you can contact. I know early on the customer service line was not very helpful, but we have heard great things about it recently that it is a lot more helpful. There's a 1-800 number that you can call to get the customer service, and this is the SBA Office of Disaster Assistance Customer Service, and that number is 1-800-659-2955. So 1-800-659 659-2955. And they also have an email that is disastercustomerservice@sba.gov. So disastercustomerservice@sba.gov. That's how you check on an EIDL loan. At my office, we cannot do it. We don't have access to these computer systems. The field offices are in a different kind of hierarchy at the SBA than our Office of Disaster Assistance. And then when you're referring to your PPP loan, and this, I had mentioned this early on because it's so important, only your lender knows. So you want to know where your application is. If you want to make sure it's been submitted, if your application was a hangover from the first round that did not get submitted for some reason, you need to be on the phone with that lender ensuring that that application is being submitted. And once it's submitted, it's turned around by the SBA extremely quickly. I think, within a day or two. And then from that point, the bank has only 10 calendar days to disperse funds. So this process goes really quickly. You're talking, as long as your application is good and there's no issues with your application in the bank and you've gotten through that part and they approve it, you're talking about getting that money in, less than 2 weeks. So it's a very quick process, but only the bank can tell you that. So, and I know that there's been a lot of issue with people saying, well, the bank told me to call the SBA. That's not the correct answer.
All
We
right,
cannot
so
tell
maybe
them.
we can answer that question with a third party. I don't know if Lance is on the line. Lance, are you here? Can you answer the question? What are you still taking applications? Are there any banks not taking applications? Lance, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me, Ethan?
Yeah, quick 20 seconds.
Yes, Community Bank is still taking them. If you want to email myself, and I can kind of run point on that, ldiani@communitybank.tv. I'll send it on the chat, my email, and I can kind of play traffic cop, so to speak. But thank you for the shout out, Ethan. I know a lot of banks, just for the sake of all the banks, I know a lot of banks are doing their very best. There's a lot of applications that are coming our way, but we certainly want to help out, all the folks, especially those in our community. So thank you for that,
Yeah,
Ethan.
and not to give you special attention or anything, but I know that Lance is a sponsor of PBX, and he's helped out a lot of people in the network, and he happens to be on the call. So thank you, Lance. Let's go back to Kelly and some of the other questions that just came through. Again, if you have questions that went unanswered, please go ahead and post them in the chat. Do you see any there, Kelly, that you want to comment on?
Yeah, I would like to say thanks to Lance too. Community Bank is an SBA lender. They're with us all the time, not just for the PPP, and we do appreciate everything that they're doing to help the small businesses in Western Pennsylvania. Let me see, there's some questions about payroll taxes. Again, this is the amounts that you included in there. I think that there may be some issues with some types of federal taxes. You'd have to definitely want to go to the Treasury's website and take a look at that interim final rule on that to make sure that you're calculating everything right in the portion of that rule that talks about how to calculate the payroll that you're going to request. But if you've included like your state tax and things like that in there, then yes, you can pay that out of those funds. So you just want to make sure that, you're including the right things. And in that interim final rule, it's at treasury.gov. And there's a big red banner across the top that talks about the COVID-19 business programs. Click on that, and there are some great resources. That fact sheet, instead of putting together a standard operating procedure, an SOP for this loan program, they came out with an interim final rule, and then any updates made to that interim final rule are being done through the facts. So there's it's frequently asked questions on the Treasury's website. I think they're up to about 40 some questions. Those supplement that interim final rule. So take a look at that and you can see what it is. But like I said, these are going to be the things that whatever you applied, when you applied for that loan, when you calculated your payroll expenses, it'll be what the taxes that you included in there. The EIDL loan, there's a question here about how do they calculate the amount of the EIDL loan. The EIDL loan is different than most loans where you're not coming to the SBA and saying, I need to borrow $75,000. What you're doing is you're submitting your information to them. You're telling them what your monthly expenses are, or you're putting the information down on that loan application, and then somebody will look at that. Somebody in their loan department will look at that, and then they will contact you and let you know, based on the information you provided, here's how much money we think that you would need on your EIDL loan to be able to get your business through this period of time. You can, there will be some dialogue back and forth on that. You do not have to take, if they tell you you qualify for $200,000, you don't need to take $200,000. You can take a lesser amount, and you can work with them on that. Like I said, that is a fairly low interest rate, 3.75 up to 30 years. So you do have a good time, a long while to repay that. So that was another question on there. So that, like I said, but the amount of that loan is going to be between you and the personnel at the Office of Disaster Assistance that are reviewing your application. So they'll help you with that. And with that, you definitely don't want to be undercapitalized when it comes to working capital. We don't want you to take out, we don't really know when this end is for this pandemic. We're assuming that we're starting on the uptick. We're starting to, businesses are starting to reopen. Some of the things are, but we just don't know. And so you want to make sure that you're getting enough that if you need to have working capital for a period of time, that you can have that. There's a question about rent on here. A lot of businesses, and this is very standard for businesses, not just small businesses, that their small business doesn't own their property. So if your business is in a building, a lot of times you'll have one company that owns your building and owns your equipment, and another company that is the business itself. So, and the business pays rent to the owner of the building, which is your other company. And so when you have a situation like that, it still works as the same way. I mean, both of those businesses, if they have employees, could apply for a PPP, but the one business that is paying rent, regardless if it's to your other business, they still can calculate that rent. You can still pay out of your 25% of the PPP, you can pay rent. So that was a question for that that was on here as well. Trying to skip through, try to find something that we haven't really talked about. There's a question about EIDL being less restrictive, and it absolutely is. As I mentioned, PPP is extremely limited in what you can do. There are only 4 authorized expenses for a PPP loan: payroll, and that's going to be your salary, your taxes, your retirements, benefits, payroll, your rent, your mortgage interest, and your utilities. Only 4 things. The EIDL loan has no restrictions. You can't use it to pay off another loan. You can use it to make your monthly payments. I mean, it is a 3.75% loan, which is really good for a business. So you can you can use it to make your monthly whatever your monthly expenses and things like that. You can use it for payroll if you need to. You can use it for equipment that you're going to need to say your business needs to really make a pivot during this time because you can't operate face to face, or you need to have plexiglass at all of your cashier stations. The EIDL loan, you can use those funds for just about anything. So that is a great one. There's a question about the return fund. So like I'd mentioned, I'm not shying away from the fact that there were some businesses in the first round that received funding that shouldn't have. They've returned that funding. A lot of them have already returned that funding. On Monday, I had heard that already $10 billion had been returned to the SBA and was actually I'm sorry?
Pennsylvania alone?
No, across the country. $10 billion that have been borrowed by some of the larger institutions of higher education and sports teams and things like that. 10 billion of that money had already been returned and had been added back into this current round of PPP. We're anticipating that all of that money will be returned. I know there's a deadline coming up. I think it's May 7th. If a business doesn't meet the new guidelines that have been published in the facts that you can find at treasury.gov, they have until May 7th to return that money. And some guidance was provided today from the SBA and the Treasury to our lenders to explain to them about that. So, we're anticipating more money will be returned and added back in.
Okay, I have a question, Dr. Hunt, from Caleb again. How is the SBA going to treat a business who calculated their loan amount improperly, basically too high or too low, when it comes to forgiveness?
I'm sorry, can you tell me? I was reading and listening at the same time. What was the first part?
This might actually be a good question for an
Okay.
accountant, but if the SBA calculation was done improperly in the application process, whether they asked for too much or too little, how is the SBA going to treat that business when it comes to forgiveness? Or is it up to the bank?
Yeah. Well, it will be up to the bank because they're the one that will be able to authorize the forgiveness, but it will be up to that business, still to show that. And when we get the additional guidelines that we're talking about that we're waiting for, it will provide that type of information. We've had a lot of banks that have said that, a lot of businesses that have contacted us in both of those scenarios. So we've had businesses that say, wait a minute, I asked for way too much money. I couldn't spend this much money. I don't know how I did this incorrectly. You can reduce the amount of a loan. So if you have a PPP loan, it hasn't closed yet, you can work with your lender to reduce that amount. So say you were approved for 200,000, but you realize now I only need 100,000. You can reduce that. Your lender can work with you. My team at my office can help to make that happen, and we can get that number reduced. What we cannot do is increase the amount of a loan. So once that a loan is approved at an amount, that's the amount you have. And so if it's not enough, you need to look at, what it is enough for, and, make sure that you document that very, clearly, so that when you go to ask for the loan forgiveness, you're able to show any documentation that you would have to support
There's
your
actually
claims.
a really good, again, just a shout out to our sponsors who helped us put this call together, at H2R. You can actually go to their website. They have actually posted an entire plethora of information about accounting, what to look for, what to take care of. These resource pages are really awesome. So thanks, everybody. Next question. Rick asked a question here, and I lost it. Other than EIDL, EIDL, are there other SBA options for working capital that you can touch on that direct people to? People on this call might be,
I know that our SBA lenders on the phone aren't going to appreciate me saying this, but we are open for business in all of our regular loan programs as well. So right now, all of our concentration is really on PPP and, getting these loans in and everything. But we also have other loan products. We have our traditional 7A loan, which is our largest loan that we have. And so, all of our SBA lenders, most of them are 7A lenders. So we have that. We have our 504 loan, which will provide a great opportunity. This loan is right now, I think, at a 3.04% interest rate, very low loan. So we have our 504 loan. So we have all of our typical loans. If you go to SBA.gov and click on the lending tab, you can see all of the loans that we have. We have loans for people that want to export products. We have, bridge financing, So there's a lot of loan products that we have. Those are all still available throughout this. this. You know, there are actually some businesses that are growing because of the pandemic. You know, so if you're in some of these different health fields or doing medical testing, you know, think of some of the labs that are run. You know, these businesses are actually increasing because of the pandemic. And so, you know, if you need capital, you need equipment, you know, the 504 loan is a great one for equipment, but you can look at some of the loan programs that we have and take advantage of them as well. In addition to that, there are other programs out there to help businesses through the COVID-19. You know, the SBA products are, of course, out there in the forefront because Congress has given us, you know, almost $700 billion so far to do these programs. But the IRS has some tax credit programs that you can look at irs.gov. Take a look at those programs. Some of those you cannot use in conjunction with a PPP loan. So if you want tax credit, employee tax credit, you can't, you know, get the money to pay your employees and then claim a tax credit on that. But there are some things out there that businesses can take advantage of. The state has some loans. I know that they did at times. You'll see they'll pop up, but they usually don't have, you know, quite as much, well, not anywhere near as much money as the SBA does to offer these, and those loans go extremely and grants go extremely quickly. But keep an eye on the state programs. DCED has a lot of amazing resources for small businesses. You can go to their site and take a look at what the state has to offer. And then also even private organizations, you're seeing a lot of them come out with, you know, grants and, you know, even smaller grants. I saw one for hairdressers, $500 grant for hairdressers. They're shut down, and, you know, things like that. So, you know, take a look online, look at that. I think Facebook has had some stuff. Look and see what you can find, but there are other programs around.
Another question is it all or nothing with, and if you answer this, I apologize. I'm multitasking here with this, all this stuff over here. Is it all or nothing when it comes to forgiveness? Will it be prorated if you mess something up, or if you pay too much or pay too little, or didn't employ everybody back?
Right.
What's the...
Well, we're waiting on further guidance on the loan forgiveness, of course. But as I had mentioned earlier, the way that the interim final rule reads is that all or some of the loan would have to be repaid if it's not done in accordance with that 75-25 rule. If it was like either you're in or out, you know, all or none, then it would say all of the loan has to be repaid. But it says all or some. So that leads me to believe that there is going to be some type of mechanism in there that will, you know, determine how much of the loan. Like I said, if it was going to be you're in or out, it would say, if you don't do this, all of the loan will have to be repaid. But it says all or some. And I know there are people out there that were in a dire pinch and they needed money really quickly. They knew that the PPP was funding quickly, and they needed the money so bad that they took the money knowing that they had no intention of using it for the purpose, that they were just going to use it as a loan, 1% interest. They have 2 years to pay it back. They'll figure that out when the time comes. But it was either their business was not going to make it, or they were going to take this money, you know, any way that they could get it. And so, you know, I totally understand that you have to, as a business owner, you make those hard decisions. You decide what you need to do to keep your business open. And if, you know, if that's the case, you know, hopefully you can find some way to refinance this loan for longer than 2 years.
Let's go to Vince real quick. If an employee decides not to return after they've been paid during the 8-week period, is there a deadline for when they are replaced? And must it be the same exact hours and or rate? Can you comment on that? Or
yeah, if after that 8-week period for the loan forgiveness, then you're back to running your business however you see fit. If an employee quits, they quit. If they want to, you know, if say that you get the PPP loan, you pay your employees for the 8-week period, you do everything perfect, you apply for your loan forgiveness, but something happens in our economy that your business is still not able to reopen and you have to furlough all of those employees, there is no penalty to you. This loan only provided you the funding for an 8-week time frame. As long as you follow the rules for that 8 weeks, what happens after that 8 week on week 9, you have to run your business. You have to do what you have to do. And unfortunately that could mean furloughing employees, letting them go on unemployment, whatever that would be. So definitely, like I said, just that 8-week period is what this loan is concerned with. I see a question on here, and one that I love to answer because it takes me out of PPP and COVID-19, and says, what can the SBA do to help me grow my business? And that is really what the SBA's purpose is here to do. We help businesses to start, to grow, and to succeed. One way we do that is through access to capital, which is what these funding programs are. But other ways that we do that is through counseling. A lot of our resource partners provide our counseling piece. But the third area is what this gentleman asked about, and that's government contracting. So we have a great team at my office headed up by my deputy director, Regina Pazowski, and her team work with businesses that want to sell their products or services to the government. And so they can call our office, in Pittsburgh. Our number's on the internet. Call there, leave a message there. We'll get back with them within that day. We'll get back with them, unless it's late in the afternoon, it might be the next day. We'll get back with them, give them information, but we are still operating. My team is still operating. We are still doing everything that we would do in normal times. And so we can definitely help if you have something that you'd like to sell to the government.
All right, we have to wrap it up at this point,
Sure.
at least on our end. So real quick, before I ask you to give out the website where people can, again, do some research, and I'll actually type it in for you as we go.
Okay,
I just want to thank Kimberly Baker-Nicholas at PBX for hosting this call. If you'd like to opt into the invite list for future calls to help small businesses and other neat little things that they're doing, all you need to do is text PBX to the number 22828. Again, that's PBX, and text those characters to the number 22828. I'm going to go ahead and ask you, Dr. Hunt, what is the website, or did Gina just provide it? Was it U.S. Chamber of Commerce or?
No, that's for the Chamber of Commerce. That's
Excuse me.
well a very
Other loans is what she said.
Yes, yeah, that's also a good one though. But our website, our national website is SBA.gov. So just Small Business Administration, SBA.gov. And there you can go on to the local resources tab, and you can find my office on that tab. And so you can drill down that way. And you can also look at all of the resources on there for small businesses, not just during this pandemic, but things that we offer all the time. When you go to the local resource page on SBA.gov, there'll be a place that you can actually sign up for what we call government deliveries, gov deliveries. We send these out not that often. You're not going to be bombarded every day with an email from my office, believe me. Sometimes it's less than once a week. But when we're doing classes, or we have any kind of training, or there's something going on that we want to make businesses aware of, we'll send it out on a gov delivery, and you can sign up for those right there on there. There's also a calendar that includes all of our resource partners who are all doing an amazing job. The PASBDC network, our SCORE network, our Women's Business Center at Chatham, one of the best in the nation, are all doing webinars. They're all still providing counseling. You can get the same day counseling at many of these places. So, reach out, look at that local assistance tab on the SBA.gov website. Another important one is our Twitter feed. We have Twitter. It's the only social media that we have. It's Pittsburgh I think it's at SBA_Pittsburgh. You can find us on Twitter. We try to tweet a couple times a day with information that is helpful to small businesses. The most important thing that you can do is go to that Treasury website, treasury.gov. And right, like I said, the red banner on the top, click on that, get to that page where all of those resources are. If you're an SBA lender and you're providing loans in these for the PPP, there's a whole group of information there available for lenders. You can look at that for borrowers, and then general information, which includes the interim final rule, and all of the facts, the frequently asked questions that actually supplement that rule. Remember, because there's no SOP on this, so those facts supplement that rule. And there's also some other things, procedural notices that have been released. Take a look at that information. You know, you can always call my office, and we'll be more than happy to help.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kelly Hunt. You have been absolutely fantastic in answering these questions. You were on the call for a whole another 46 minutes. I can't tell you how much your time. I know you're getting murdered with emails and inquiries and phone calls right now with the staff. How many do you have on your staff?
I have 9, counting me.
9.
I take that back. We hired somebody yesterday. She doesn't have a computer or phone yet, but we're still going to count her. We're 10. We're small, but we're mighty. And like I said, we are extremely passionate about what we do. So.
Yep. And I also want to thank Slippery Rock University. I want to thank John Seaback Insurance Group, H2R CPA. I want to thank Dan personally at the Lynch Law Group, and Community Bank as well for helping out so many people with their loans. Everybody have a very safe and wonderful rest of your week. Thanks for being a part of the PBX phone call, and don't forget to opt in. If you want updates, just text PBX to the number 22828. Thank you and goodbye.